Robert Kennedy Jr., the Jeffrey Dahmer of the animal kingdom, has horrified his family almost as much as Jeffrey Dahmer horrified his family by endorsing the most horrifying Republican presidential nominee in history, the only president who was more of a criminal in the White House than Richard Nixon, who Robert Kennedy Jr.'s father tried to keep out of the presidency by running against him until Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, which instantly, and it seemed permanently, created a beatific glow around the name Robert Kennedy, a name which his son has now fully disgraced. Robert Kennedy Jr.'s younger sister, Kerry Kennedy, said, quote, "I'm outraged and disgusted by my brother's gaudy and obscene embrace of Donald Trump and his flagrant and inexplicable effort to desecrate and trample and set fire to my father's memory." Robert Kennedy Jr. told many lies in his speech announcing his endorsement of Donald Trump, including this one, quote, "The mainstream media networks maintain a near-perfect embargo on interviews with me," end quote. Over a year ago, on July 12th, 2023, I issued a public invitation to Robert Kennedy Jr. to appear on this program at the time of his choosing, and he never chose to do that. If he does show up, I'll make it easy on him by giving him the first question ahead of time. I'll give it to him right now. It's a new question that I didn't have until I read an article by Kurt Anderson published in The Atlantic this weekend, in which Kurt Anderson describes buying cocaine from his college classmate Bobby Kennedy when they were both freshmen at Harvard College in 1972. Because Donald Trump favors the death penalty for drug dealers, the death penalty for doing what Bobby Kennedy did, at the end of his article titled "RFK Jr. Was My Drug Dealer," Kurt Anderson suggests this question for Robert Kennedy Jr., quote, "Given that you sold cocaine in your youth, how do you feel about Trump's advocacy of a regime that might have resulted in your own execution at age 19? Of course, Donald Trump does not advocate the death penalty for violations of the Espionage Act or any of the other crimes he's been accused of and for which he is awaiting trial, which we will get to in a moment with Andrew Weissman and Neil Katyal. There are only 71 days left in Donald Trump's political career, assuming he comes in second in the Electoral College for the second time in a row. And the news media is finally focusing on the problems caused by Donald Trump's tariffs.
Well, let's talk about Trump's record during his first term. He did impose rounds of tariffs, and it cost Americans nearly $80 billion in new taxes. Do you acknowledge that imposing more tariffs will ultimately cost consumers?
Well, what it really does is it penalizes importers from bringing goods outside the country into the country.
That answer was, of course, a lie, as is every word Donald Trump has ever said about tariffs. It took 8 years. It took 8 years to finally get the news media to focus on the lies Donald Trump and now JD Vance tell about tariffs. It has been a very lonely 8 years for me, having had to explain repeatedly on this program what most people already know, which is that tariffs are paid by the consumers in the country that imposes the tariff. China doesn't pay Trump tariffs. We pay Trump tariffs. That is the point of a tariff. The purpose of a tariff is to raise the price of that imported good so that Americans will not be able to buy as much of that imported good. So every penny of Trump's tariffs, every penny of them, has been paid by Americans in the form of higher prices. And all of the tariff money collected by the United States government has been paid out to farmers across Iowa and elsewhere in the country to make up for the massive losses they have suffered in grain sales to China, because China retaliated against the Trump tariffs by, among other things, not buying agricultural products from the United States of America. Many of those Iowa farmers who lost their grain sales and their income are still voting for Donald Trump because they're now the biggest welfare recipients in American history. They have received $28 billion in cash payments, just cash, here it is, directly to them for doing absolutely nothing. And no one in the Republican world is worried about the work ethic of those farmers who are collecting that no-strings-attached money directly from the federal treasury to make up for the farmers' loss of income from trade with China. Donald Trump's tariffs are sales taxes on you that are in effect used to make huge welfare payments to American farmers. And now Donald Trump wants to impose even more tariffs, which former Treasury Secretary and Harvard economics professor Lawrence Summers has called the worst economic proposal in U.S. history. Donald Trump has never once even come close to answering a reporter's question about tariffs, and JD Vance did not answer the question about tariffs put to him yesterday. They never answer questions. No matter how many questions you ask them, they do not answer. A lie is not an answer. I'm ready to heap praise on the reporter or debate moderator who asks Donald Trump the simple question, what is a tariff? Just those words, nothing else, because I think the world would find out that Donald Trump doesn't know what a tariff actually is. Reporters always prefer to show off the complexity of their questions, so we will probably never hear that simple question asked of Donald Trump. As he can feel the enthusiasm for Kamala Harris's presidential campaign, Donald Trump knows which side has the momentum in the campaign now and what that could mean to his future as a criminal defendant. The stakes for Donald Trump personally in the presidential election could not be higher. The Electoral College will either hand him the White House or keep him on track to spend the rest of his life as defendant Trump. 78-year-old criminal and civil defendant Donald Trump will be able to crush the criminal proceedings against him if he wins the Electoral College. But if he doesn't, his life as a criminal defendant will proceed in a federal case in Washington, D.C., and he will be sentenced in a criminal case in New York City, where he has already been convicted. He will eventually go to trial in Georgia, facing criminal charges there, and Special Prosecutor Jack Smith has appealed to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals to put the criminal case against Donald Trump for violations of the Espionage Act and the illegal possession of classified documents back on track on its way to trial. In an appeal of a dismissal ruling by Donald Trump's favorite judge, Aileen Mercedes Cannon, who Donald Trump appointed to the federal court, Jack Smith insisted that it is indeed constitutional for the Attorney General to appoint a special counsel. Judge Cannon dismissed the case by declaring the appointment of special counsel Jack Smith unconstitutional. Jack Smith's brief to the Court of Appeals filed today says the Attorney General validly appointed the special counsel, who is also properly funded. In ruling otherwise, the district court deviated from binding Supreme Court precedent, misconstrued the statutes that authorized the special counsel's appointment, and took inadequate account of the long-standing history of Attorney General appointments of special counsel. Jack Smith's brief cites the appointment of a special counsel for the treason prosecution of Confederate General Jefferson Davis and John Surratt, the man who aided and abetted the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln in 1865. Jack Smith did not ask the appeals court to remove Judge Cannon from the case, but the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals could decide to do so. If the 11th Circuit reverses Judge Cannon's decision, it would be the third time they have reversed major rulings by Judge Cannon, and we will discover if 3 strikes means Judge Cannon is out. Trump's criminal defense lawyers now have 30 days to respond to Jack Smith's brief. Written filings in the appeal will be complete by mid-October. Oral arguments in the case will probably be scheduled after the election. And by that time, if Kamala Harris wins the presidency 71 days from now, then Donald Trump will know that he will indeed spend the rest of his life as defendant Trump in trial courts and appeals courts.